Now that we have our file with our outfit and avatar open, we can now begin by creating the pleated dress the way we talked about. But before we do that, I'm just going to select all of the patterns that we already created with our transform pattern tool, right click and select freeze. And this way I'm going to situate their position, so that way I don't have to worry about them changing their position while I'm simulating other pieces of clothing. And I'm also going to move the patterns to the right so they won't bother me as I create the pleated dress over the silhouette. So firstly, we're going to start by grabbing our rectangle tool and clicking once to get the dialog box, and we're going to input the width to 130 millimeters and the height to something small like 55, and hit OK. And this is actually going to be a part of our waistband, and we're going to start off by splitting its upper and bottom line with the edit pattern tool. So we did this in the previous clip. Just click on the line, right click and split. Select the final option to create 3 segments that are perfectly identical and hit OK. And we're also going to do the same for the bottom part. So right click and split, and the number of segments is 3. Now we're also going to put some internal lines in here. We're going to use our internal polygon line tool for this and just connect these dots. There we go. Alright, so as I said, this is going to be a part of our waistband, and now we're actually going to continue to creating the pleated part. And we're going to do this by simply copying this and pasting it 3 times. So Control C and Control V, and create 3 identical rectangles. Now I did this because the amount of segments needed to create a single pleat is 3. So all of these 3 rectangles are going to create one single pleat, and all of them will be sewn onto this piece of rectangle that's going to be part of the waistband. But I don't necessarily need these rectangles to be separated into 3 different pieces, so I'm going to take my edit pattern tool and I'm going to merge these lines together. So select both of them using Shift, right click and go merge. And do the same for this line. Right click and merge. And we also need to put the internal lines here, so don't forget about that. Okay, so these are going to be our pleats. So now the next step is to grab the pleats tool and start by clicking on the beginning of the rectangle, go to the very end and double click. I'm going to choose the knife pleats for this dress and hit OK. And as you can already see, the internal lines are already colored correctly. Now before I simulate or do anything for that matter, I need to sew this pleated part onto the waistband, but I can't use my segment sewing tool or my free sewing tool for this job because the pleats tool has a special kind of sewing. And you're going to be able to find it right next to the pleats icon, and it's called the pleats sewing tool. So go to the waistband and select the line you want to be sewing, and select the line of pleats that you want to be sewing. And as you can see, the sewing is automatically established for every 3 segments. And before I start simulating, I'm just going to take my transform pattern tool and I'm also going to freeze this pattern. So right click and freeze it. So let's see what happens. Okay, now if I zoom in so you'll see better, you'll see that we get tiny pleats. Now I just made them short like this, so simulation time would be easier for us. Of course, now we can take the edit pattern tool and maybe prolong them a bit. So something like that. And let's simulate. And now we can see better that we actually implemented knife pleats. So what we're going to do now is basically this piece that we just created. We're going to copy and paste them. So go off simulation mode and position this part a little closer to her waist. And what we're going to do now is copy and paste this part. So Control C and Control V. and put it right next to the part we just created. And we're going to do this over and over again until we go around her waist and she has these pleats all around her waist. So I'm going to let you do that on your own because it's basically just a very simple process. You just need to repeat this over and over again by copying and pasting and positioning the pleats around her waist in the 3D window. So I'm just going to finish that, and in the next clip we will continue with sewing these pieces together and simulating them.